Theresa is an academic advisor at Indiana University. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Theresa.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about a program that I have called Mind Over Money, and it's about working with college students on dealing with financial issues in college. So we're going to go through some information that I have to get you a little bit into what I've been working on as an academic advisor, and also what I've been working on here at Indiana University in a lot of different capacities. So first I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Theresa Hitchcock, and I am an academic advisor at IU, and I'm also a first-generation college student. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and was the first person in my family to go to school, and the first person in my family to graduate from college. And I've been an academic advisor since 2005 at a couple different institutions all over the Midwest. And I'm currently at Indiana University working with 21st Century Scholars, which is a program for students who meet the free and reduced lunch standards in high school to go through and get some college preparedness, and if they graduate with a 2.0 and stay out of drugs and alcohol, they can go to any school in the state of Indiana with in-state tuition paid for. I'm also working on my PhD in higher education and student affairs, and my dissertation topic is going to be on financial literacy of low-income students. So that's just a little bit about myself, but I kind of wanted to know, before we get started and before I start telling you about what I've learned, I wanted to kind of find out who we have and what your motivations are for attending this session. So I thought we could use the chat format, and if you guys could just let me know maybe who you are or where you're from, but also what motivated you to take some time out of your day today to listen to this session. So if you could use that chat format.
Theresa, this is Jeff again, and I'm at a 2-year school in San Antonio, and so this we have a lot of students that would, I guess, be descriptive of yourself here, and so this is an issue that we deal with often here.
Absolutely. I think one of the hard things when talking with students about finances is that and talking with student affairs professionals, is that we do have a lot of variety of students. The 2-year student who's coming back to school has a lot of different financial issues than the traditional age 4-year college student. And so those are some very important pieces. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I'm here. When I work with my students, and I think that most of us in the student affairs profession can agree with this, is that sometimes it's really important that our students don't see that we can establish a level of trust with our students from the very beginning. And so one of the things I tell students when I start talking about money is the first thing I ever tell them is that I'm absolutely terrible with money. Every day I struggle with making those choices, and so I kind of consider this like my AA for working with money. And so I use this program to kind of help my students but not make the same mistakes that I have made. As a student, one of the reasons why I decided to do this was that I remember wasting my student loan checks when I was an undergrad. Getting that, I was on a full tuition scholarship, and so every semester I'd get extra money and I would just spend it. There was no rhyme or reason for it, and so I ended up with graduating from college with a lot of debt and a bad credit score because of the choices I made in college. And that ruining my credit is affecting me even to this day, of trying to get, my husband and I are trying to get a house, and the spending that we have. And even to this point I struggle to just prioritize my spending. So I hope that I can be, for students and for other student affairs professionals, and be an example of what not to do. And I believe that financial issues are just as important of an aspect of student success as academic issues, engagement issues, involvement, all those types of things are. So it's something I feel very passionate about. Also, I have no budget in my office for creating any programming, so just like this conference gives us opportunity to do some free programming and free networking, these programs that I have developed don't really have a lot of money involved because I have no budget to do that. So maybe I can share some things with you all for your own thing. And then lastly, I care so much about students, and so I want them to experience things, the college environment, in a better way than I did. So what are we going to cover today? We're not going to talk about financial aid, but I will give you a brief history of the American college student and some data about college students and money. Let me minimize that. And also, we can look at the role of the student affairs professional in working with students on financial issues, and what we can do to help students through those issues. And then if we get time, we'll do some activities. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is a little bit of blast back to our American college student history course, and talk a little bit about who the American college student has been in the past. So starting with before World War II, and I lump all of from the beginning of Harvard to pre-World War II into one category, because that was a very homogeneous time in higher education. Most of our college students were men, most of them were Caucasian, and most of them were upper class. And I say most, and that's a generality, of course, but I think it's a pretty strong generality. There was, with the creation of the Morrill Act, some opportunities for African American students to attend HBCUs, for the land-grant institutions to serve farmers and other populations that may not have gotten it through the traditional college experience. But in general, we're looking at a wealthy white male student population. That all started to change in World War II when more women started to enroll in college. The men were going off to war, and so women were, in order for colleges to survive, they had to create an environment or allow women to enroll in college so that they could keep their doors open. Some institutions actually chose not to keep their doors open, and they closed down during the war, but the majority of institutions allowed women to come in. And so while the men were in war, women were going to college, and some of these women were taking on a little bit more of a professional career, but in some colleges and universities actually became a training ground for women to go learn skills that they would later use in the military. But still, the women were upper class, and there really wasn't a lot of financial aid. Things started to change a little bit after World War II with the GI Bill. The GI Bill allowed all veterans to go to college without financial need, really. So more men were coming back into the universities and colleges, and women were going into the caregiver role and not so much into the college student role. But the GI Bill created the first really strong nationwide financial aid system, and so we started to see access become more of an issue in campuses. People were coming with the ability to go to college, and so we started this, and we also started to see the creation of the community college to serve different varieties of students. And then in 1964 and 65, the American college student changed dramatically. This is when when Congress decided that college should be an opportunity for all people regardless of need. And this was the creation of work-study, student loans, and the federal Pell Grant. And it also allowed women and minority students the opportunity to go to college because need was not going to be so much of an issue. So we saw for the first time minority students, women, first-generation college students, and we also saw a dramatic increase in the number of students who were going part-time, who were non-traditional, and who were also attending community colleges. And so while we're looking at we've looked a little bit historically as to what the American college student was, I'd like to show you a clip of what today's college student might be. This is not going to work like it usually does. Let me see if I can get it to work. Maybe we won't.
It may be
Sorry.
because you have your microphone plugged in.
Oh, so should I unplug my microphone?
Yeah.
So this was a session about the American college student currently and how he tries to go to college for the financial aid. When these are posted, you can use the YouTube video and look at that at a later point if that's okay. Hello?
Yeah, I'll link it on. I'll link it on later.
Okay. So here are some facts about the American college student and financial aid and financial issues. Between 2000 and 2005, the price of tuition at public colleges rose over 57%. And the average American college student has over $2,000 in credit card debt. And over 2/3 of college students who graduate from four-year colleges and universities have student loan debt. So this is a significant amount of students who are graduating from college with substantial amounts of debt, either it be credit card debt or student loan debt. What we're also seeing is that in the time period from 1978 to 2008, we're seeing some family income changes. And what this shows is that in the decades of prosperity from 1978 to 1998, family incomes in general grew. And the lowest percentile is this 20% right here. Proportionally, compared to the rest of the United States in that time period, the lowest portion of the American families did not increase in income compared to the other portions of the population. Now this is really important for the next slide that you'll see, because right here you'll see that in this tough time in the past 10 years, in general, American families have not increased their income, but more specifically, this lower percentage of 20% has not only not increased their income, but they've actually decreased in the amount of income that they have. However, in this same time period, you'll see that tuition at four-year schools has continued to rise. And so whereas the lowest 20 percentile of American families financially, their incomes have either not increased significantly or even decreased, tuition is continuing to rise at an exponential rate. And so lower income families are really struggling to meet the financial needs of American college students. Also, this next graph, these are all from the College Board's Trends in Financial Aid. This next graph shows that the percentage of the tuition and fees and room and board that are paid through the federal Pell Grant. So you'll see that in 1988 at the public four-year school, 50% of the tuition and fees and room and board were paid by the federal Pell Grant. So a low-income student could know that about half of what they needed to pay for college was going to be paid for with a need-based grant that they would never have to pay back. That has decreased to only 35%. And we know, and so this shows the significant challenge that the lower income college student has with paying for college. And at the same time, it is the College Board also says that the lowest incomes of families will pay over 47% of their family's income just for their student to go to college every year. So a lot of challenge. So now that we've seen kind of where the college student is and where they've come from and what the financial aid situation is, now let's try to take it back onto a more individualized level. This is an activity I do with my students, and I'd encourage you while you're sitting at your desk or wherever you are today to do this, because I think it's a really powerful display of what we do with our money. And so what I'd like for you to do is write down the 10 things that you spent, the last 10 things you spent money on. And so I'd like These could be with your debit card or cash or your parents' money or your credit card or whatever, and write down the last 10 things you spent money on. And so what I will share with you is this one is our trip to Disney World. We're going to Disney World this summer with my son. One of my bigger weaknesses in life is coffee, and so that's one of mine. And 10 things that you spent money on. Would anybody want to share one of the ones that they spent money on?
Someone shared that they just went to Disney World too.
Oh, yeah.
One person goes to Dunkin' Donuts almost daily. Um, gas, dinner outs, and then holiday spending. It is Cyber Monday.
Oh, yes, it's Cyber Monday.
Use money to buy DVDs during Black Friday. McDonald's. I've had a hard time with it because it's so easy to count it as off, like a cheat day or on a diet. So I think that goes back, yeah. Holiday gifts for the wife. So hard to argue with that one.
Yeah, lots of, it sounds like, this is a really good time to be doing this session because this is a time whenever we catch ourselves as professionals, even seeing how, Black Friday catches you and that idea of a good deal or being able to get multiple things. I personally got pushed over on Friday trying to get a TV, and I was pretty mad. I almost got into a fist fight over a TV, and I was like, this is just not worth it.
Wow. Then you remember doing this presentation today and let it go.
Absolutely. Well, he was a lot bigger than me, so I didn't really have a choice.
There's Harry Potter movie night was like $30. But there are a lot of Black Friday comments in here. So yeah, you're correct. It is very timely.
Yes. Black Friday is one of my hardest times whenever I really start to see how we get caught up in the necessity or the thought that wow, things are cheaper. And my husband reminded me a couple of years ago that if it meant we didn't have any money in our account to pay our bills, then it was a lot more expensive. So it's always a good point. So when looking at the things that you spend money on, here's an example of what the United States spender in general spends money on. What you'll see is that in this bottom area right down here, housing takes up 34% of our income on an average basis. However, if you look at what the average American consumer family, the average income is over $63,000. But if you look at the students, if you look at the eligibility for Pell Grant, a family making $63,000, there's no way they would be eligible for Pell Grant. They would be considered wealthy according to the financial aid system. And so this is kind of an interesting breakdown of where our money goes. And this right here always shocks me because whenever you look at going and getting a mortgage, the rate that the percentage that you always hear is that your housing should cost you any more than 20% of your income. Needless to say, according to this graph, housing does take up a bigger percentage of their income than it should. One thing that I like to do with my students in regards to this is have my students actually create their own graph of how their money is spent and what percentage of their money goes to what. Excuse me. So as to see where we're spending our money and how that relates to the rest of the American society. Excuse me. So when working with students, I've come up with this 3-level thing. So the three levels or the three things are values, talking to students about their values and what it is that's most important to them. So what I have students do next is put on their page, on the other side of those 10 things that you just spent money on, what are the 5 things that you value most? And here are some of my examples. In my life, the things that I value most are obviously my family, my friends, and my education. And then, but I notice whenever I do this that if you were to take what you just spent money on, try to align those things with what you actually value. Do we value Black Friday? Is saving $20 something you value, or is it something that is not really that important to you? And when you try to line up where you actually spend your money with what you value, you get a very, very good explanation as to where your holes are in your money. And I use this with students not just for financial issues, but this works really well too with when talking to students about what major they want to choose or what fraternity or sorority they want to pledge, who they want to spend the rest of their life with. Thinking of the 10 characteristics of that person or that organization or that place they want to live, and the 5 things that they value the most, and can they connect those characteristics with what they value. And that's a really, really good way of helping students make right choices, not just financially, but also either academically or personally or socially. And then one of the things that's very important when working with students is talking with the students about being honest with what the true costs of attending college are. We know very clearly how much it costs to attend college with financial aid or with tuition and room and board, but also, like, what does it cost you transportation-wise? Here in Bloomington, we allow freshmen to have a car on campus, but they have to park over by the stadium on the other side of town, and so a lot of them don't feel the value in having a car on campus, but in the cost of that transportation. But for some of our students, there is a cost of loss of potential income. If you are a breadwinner in your family, like Jeff was mentioning, being at the 2-year college in San Antonio, attending college may mean that for a short time, or maybe a longer period of time, you can't you can't support your family financially. And how does that affect your ability to succeed in college, not just academically but socially and personally? Another thing when looking at associated college costs are some of the family issues that come along with it. Some of the guilt or the concerns that some of our students have with going to college. And these, I think, are a little bit isolated to maybe first-generation college students or college students who come from a lower socioeconomic background, but I think all students in general lose some of maybe their friendships or their family relationships by going away to college. And but it's also important to talk with the students about, I always talk with my students about benefits of a college degree. We have so many students here at Indiana University who want to go into the Kelley School of Business because they want to make millions and millions of dollars. And I have the conversation with my students a lot of times about, we want you to be happy and have a good college and have a good career, and that's why I would want you to go into any major and be successful. But there are some tangible benefits from a college degree in general. This next slide will illustrate that. This is the net earnings. Excuse me. So it shows how an American college student, a high school graduate, this is a grade line, and at the age of 18 through 24, the American college student is making a lot less money than they are whenever they are as they get older. And so the American high school student graduate only, that person may make a lot more money in their early years, but that person will eventually make a lot less money over their lifetime than the American college graduate. And then this also shows unemployment rates, which is another really important key for American college students to see, is that, the unemployment rate of high school of people who have never graduated from high school is astronomical, almost 15%. But the unemployment rate of people who have a bachelor's degree is less than 6%. Now this is obviously a little bit different than this shows through 2009. In 2010 it's kind of been a little bit extreme. But even in the times of other recessions, like in the recession of 2000 and then some harder times in 2006, the American college student graduate always has a lower level of unemployment than any other group. So sometimes this is good to show to a college student and say, hey, I know times are tough. I know that it's hard sometimes to see the benefit of what you're doing. But this right here shows us that you're going to have a good ability to succeed as a professional over your entire lifetime. And I think that that's a really good thing for students to be able to see visually. And even pointing out some of the highs and lows in the American experience and how the college graduate has always been the most successful of all of them. When I talk to students, I also like to give students the alternative to college, because for college students, sometimes they want to see what else is there out there. And so this website down here, valueofcollege.com, had I thought some really interesting alternatives to college. And all of these kind of have some common themes, which are entrepreneurship, outdoor work. But it's important sometimes for students to see that there are opportunities out there. But all of these kind of have a shorter lifespan in general, and involve either being an entrepreneur or being outside, as I said. And so it's sometimes nice for the college student to see that, so that they can work through what it is that they want in a lifestyle and how to go about doing that, and what it is that they value. One of my favorite spenders is Mary Todd Lincoln, and she loved to spend money. She spent $5,000 on a scarf. And so in talking with students, I always share Mary Todd Lincoln as somebody whose values weren't necessarily in line with her spending. So when we talk about students and their values and spending and financial issues, it's kind of important to think about what is their financial issues of a student telling you. I'm sure like many of you have experienced the same thing I've experienced, which is students coming into my office and saying, I need to drop out of school because I can't stay, and because of financial issues. And this is a really important thing to find out about students, because what it creates a lot of times from what financial issues show you a lot of times is the fight or flight mentality. Students are they're having problems in school, and finances are one way that students a lot of times will use as an out. I can't get to school, I can't do school well because I need money. And so we need to talk to students about, are you trying to stay in school, or do you want to leave school? And is money the real reason, or is that your explanation for wanting to leave? Another thing that financial issues tell us is that a lot of students' family backgrounds don't really prepare them well financially for college. Over 95% of all high school seniors plan to go to college, but only 1/3 of all high school seniors' parents have saved for their kids to go to college. And so that tells us that, the intention is there, but is there a reality that can support their desire to go to college? And also, as we mentioned before, attendance for low-income families will cost almost 50% of that family's income for that student to go to college. And so the family background may not support it. And then also, students may not know about financial aid and how to get through the system. And then also, my favorite thing about working with students with financial issues is it's an opportunity to help us to talk to the students about taking responsibility. It's very easy to blame other people when things aren't going well. And I've heard many students say, well, I don't have enough money, or financial aid messed me up, or this, or this, or this, when really what they're talking about is having to learn how to make choices for themselves. And it's a great opportunity for a learning experience. And then finally, the last thing is that many financial concerns are linked to motivation. Some studies have been done that showed that students who lack motivation in other parts of their lives also may have challenges with financial issues. And so there are some things that we learn whenever the importance of financial issues with working with college students. Financial stress is one of the key reasons why students leave college. And then students who leave college drop out with very high debt load. So the average student loan debt of college dropouts is over $10,000. But their average salary whenever they leave is only $24,000. So students are leaving and their financial issues are not going away. And so my goal is that I can help students think about, well, okay, I may be strapped financially right now, but if I stay, what are the benefits going to do that are going to keep me, going to make it better off for me in the long run? And that's really hard, especially for low-income students, to be able to see that long-term benefit because of the short-term concerns. And then we still are faced with students who graduate with financial obstacles. Over two-thirds of college students graduate with student loan debt, and we're talking up to $20,000 in student loan debt. So we're having our students graduate without with having to face those financial obstacles. And so we help students, we want to work with students to plan. So here are some suggestions I have, and I'll wrap this up. I have some more slides that I can send you, but these are some suggestions I have. One is to go through the financial aid process and see what it's like, see what your students are facing, and understand the process a little bit better. Also, get to know local resources, places where students, if they are desperate, can get some money. Our financial aid office provides emergency loans. We also have social services agencies and even the food pantry. And then I also encourage my students to role play with me. Talk to me. How would you, when you're going in to talk to somebody about financial issues, how do you talk to that person? And we can kind of communicate with one another. And then I encourage my students to do a cost-benefit analysis. And I know that sounds kind of fancy and everything, but just look at those, in comparison to those graphs that we just talked about. How much money am I going to make next year if I drop out of school? Well, how much money is it going to cost me? But how much money in the long run is everything going to cost me? And then I like to do needs versus wants. What do you really need and where are you going with that? And then with the use of those, write down the last 10 things you spent money on. I like to do a spending diary with my students and encourage them to really look at where they're spending their money, because now with the wonderful use of technology, with the debit cards and everything, I know I don't keep a check registry like I did before the internet was so pervasive. And so sometimes I have to stop and remember where I spent my money. And so it's really important for students to do the same thing. So here are these were just some of my ideas and some of my famous spenders. And so I'd like to finish up now with any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that, and that was a great presentation. And as Sean said in the questions, great use of graphs. I think the graphs and statistics were very kind of powerful visual for us. And there was one thing that Scott said early on, and this is your first question about why they're here or what kind of concerns they have. And he says that he's finding more students and parents jumping into college without knowing how to pay for it. particularly for housing and associated costs. Do you have any thoughts on
Absolutely.
that? Yeah.
I think that w- it's very challenging with residence life and with housing to make those points really clear. And I think that that's where admissions and financial aid have to be upfront on the cost. And I know that's really hard because what's hard is that up through admissions, we're recruiters. We're trying to get students there. We're trying to sell the best and the brightest, what we have. But once they're on campus, it's all about keeping them here and having them do the right thing. And so I think that sometimes that transparency isn't always there in the admissions process. So what we're doing next year with our students in the 21st Century Scholars Program is we're going to add a session during Welcome Week where we have the students actually print off their financial aid award letter and actually sit down and explain each piece of the award letter because our students don't understand that that anticipated financial aid is for the whole year. And so we're going to have them sit down with us and actually talk through each piece so they know how much they're expecting every semester and have that face-to-face interaction with people.
When do you do your presentation? Is that during orientation? Is that a separate session?
We do ours. This session that I've been doing, I present at the freshman in the freshman experience type of courses, which is not mandatory in our university. And so there's about 3 different ways they do them, and I've presented to about 600 students this fall through the freshman experience courses, and then I have presented with our student with different groups, excuse me, like our TRIO program and organizations like that. But I also
Um,
use a lot of this stuff in my office one-on-one with my students.
I'm sorry, I got another question and it scrolled down automatically. Okay. How can recent grads save when they're so far in debt?
That's a really good question. I wish I could figure out exactly what they need to do. However, I think the one good thing about student loan debt that is so different is that um, it's the low interest rate is so much lower than other debt, and there's a cap on the amount of money that a student has, percentage of their income that a student is allowed or required to pay. And so there's a lot of conversations that students need to be having with their financial aid, with their student loan processor, to talk about what their income is and what their actual payments can be. And that's the conversation that can provide the student with a greater amount of disposable income that they can use then to save money.
Two people talked about this, but they said mint.com is a good website. They can connect your bank accounts
Mm-hmm.
and track your spending. Another person says they use that. They also ask if they know of any other good tools that you would recommend for students to track their spending.
Um, I use an Excel spreadsheet, and I know that sounds rather cheesy, but it's the easiest format that I use, and I also use my bank's website. I work with Chase, bank with Chase, and they do a very good job of tracking.
I've never used mint.com, but I know they also have like iPhone and Android phone applications, so you can
Mm-hmm.
always have your spending with you on your phone if you have any questions on your balances.
Yeah, Chase actually sends me an email or sends me a text message if I go too far. I ask them to send it to me when I get to a certain point, and they always do. It's really nice.
A lot of questions coming in now. This one is, what are your thoughts about recent news about people being public with their debt? Will raising the awareness about college debt affect anything?
I think it's actually I think with low-income students, the awareness of debt has actually scared some people. A lot of students who are nervous about debt are scared about good debt. And I think that you have to look at the college experience as an investment, and we're okay with with investing in a house or investing in a car. But I always work with my students on helping my students see that the college experience and the degree is an investment. And if you know that over that lifespan, your net income is going to increase significantly because of your investment, then what better debt to have? And talking about student loan debt as a responsible piece of debt is a very important piece to encourage students to think about.
This question is about students from lower socioeconomics. They have a lot on their campus, and they notice they do not plan on how they will use their student loans. They spend for today, not for tomorrow. Any suggestions on reaching this population? And I would suggest this issue is for probably multiple socioeconomic levels, the lack of planning, but specifically for low socioeconomic.
Well, I think that what's challenging about, I think probably what this person is talking about is that significant amount of money that students receive in a refund that's designed to pay your living expenses for the entire semester. And that $5,000 seems like a significant amount of money. And so what does it matter if I go and buy a computer or go and buy a new pair of UGG boots or whatever? I have $5,000 for the entire semester. In December, when you're eating ramen noodles because you don't have any extra money, you don't have the money to take care of your expenses, is the problem that we face. And I think that you're right, it does affect all students, but I think with that significant amount of money that students from low-income families receive at one time, it's very easy to get into that trap. One of the things that we do with our students who are 21st century scholars, and I'm talking specifically about this group because this is where my program is centered around, but it's any student receiving that refund. We invite them to a session where I present on how to budget for the entire semester. Looking at the fact that you have from August through December to budget, you know you want to go home for Thanksgiving, you know when you want to go home for fall break, how much money do you need for those breaks? How much money are you going to want to use when you go to the football games, and how much money are you going to want to use here? And actually helping the students kind of create a budget with that significant amount of money, or not significant for some students, amount of money that they have to live off of for the entire semester. Because when your living expenses are paid, like housing and room and board, it's so easy to think that you have a lot of disposable money, but it's very easy for that money to disappear without anything. So I always I think about the things that students do, and then I'm like, okay, are you going to go to the movies on Friday night? Are you going to go out to Kilroy's on Saturday night, which is our local bar? You know, how much money are you going to pay to go to the football games? And have the students kind of create a realistic budget of this is what I know I want to do, and being honest with myself that these are the things I want to do, so I'm actually going to try to plan a little bit for
that. We have more love for Mint on here, so I'm beginning to think Mint
I can't believe I've never heard about Mint before.
I'm beginning to think they should sponsor this this webinar. One person says it's great because it helps you categorize your spending. It'll even tell you how much you spend on things like coffee.
Oh wow!
And this is what I've always heard about it, and this is what they say. It says it gives you a running tally of your net worth, which is terrifying if you still have student loans.
Oh, I bet.
And I always thought that was more about like your investments and what your investments are worth, but I guess it's just going over everything you're spending there also. So if you have issues, that's something to check out. And then Sean says you can also export Mint and online banking data as a CSV file, so you can import that into your Excel spreadsheet. And this is a question I think is a great question. As a grad student now, I use my student loans to pay off higher interest debt. Am I going down a bad path?
I'm not a financial expert by any stretch of the imagination. I am a student affairs professional. I want to stress that as closely as I can. However, I think that any time that you have the ability to get lower amounts of interest rates is always a good thing. And but one of the things that's really important to remember about student loan debt, as opposed to credit card debt or car debt or anything like that, is that student loan debt cannot be erased through bankruptcy. So if you have student loan debt, that debt will stay with you even if you try to file for bankruptcy. And so just something to consider whenever you're looking at switching around debt. But I think that if you're looking at a 30% interest rate on a credit card or 8% interest rate on student loan debt, to me that seems like an obvious answer.
Great, and we are just a couple of minutes over, but that's fine. Great questions in there and great answers on this. This session was recorded. I don't know if I told you that earlier. It was recorded. We'll have it up on Student Affairs TV, studentaffairs.tv, probably within a couple of weeks. But Theresa, thank you so much for the presentation. Great information.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry the YouTube video didn't work. I guess I couldn't figure out how to do both of those.
Can you put the YouTube video in the chat room, and so everyone can grab that really fast, and then I'll send it out on Twitter also, and then I'll link it to the presentation when it goes on Student Affairs TV.
Yeah, it's hilarious, but it's not meant to be. It's not research based or anything. It's just pretty funny.
Yeah. So there are no learning outcomes to this YouTube video.
Oh no, no, they're being absolutely hilarious.
All right.
All right, thank you very much for your time.